Alright guys, this may not be the most interesting of hooks to start off with, but for a while I've been in a creative drought and slump. I wanted to make ultimate teams for Ash. Didn't work out. Rank Ash's companions weakest to strongest also didn't work out. I even had a Hisui phase until that wore out too. But what's been on my mind as of recent has been the leagues. How good were Ash's main rival battles? How bad were his losses? How good were the battles in which he lost? In order to get the best judgment, I found it necessary to rewatch all of them, and if the title didn't give it away, my thought was, why not review them after rewatching them? So here, I'm going back to the very beginning to see how these leagues hold up now, so without stalling any longer, let's get started.
Pokemon, get to the Z!
In order to start the very beginning and introductions to the league conferences altogether, we have to dive straight into the beginning of the arc. That should be common sense, but for at least here, this is where we learn about the lore surrounding it all. Not only do we meet the soon-to-be recurring Pokemon League president Mr. Goodshow, but we also learn about the moltres lit flame that lights the Pokemon League. All this stuff eventually fades away in terms of relevancy the more leagues that comes out there, but here, it sets the stage. Unlike the games, these conferences were unknown territory, so these two pieces of information provided much needed world building. And about that fire, it's basically a Team Rocket conflict magnet because they believe a legendary flame would sell for a lot. It's funny how they technically get away with it, but the president didn't really care since he has a backup anyway, so the conference pretty much runs as normal. However, there is a second Team Rocket fight since their flame went out, which would have been a nuisance normally, but Ash's great speech and moltres coming out of nowhere was pretty cool. So far, this is a pretty nice stage to be set up for the next couple of episodes. Now, all that's left is to see how Ash performs in it. Side note, Team Rocket was practically okay with burning Ash alive with fire. Just wanted to put that out there. But with that introduction, the tournament can finally start, and the first ever opponent Ash has to come face to face with is the astounding Mandy the Juggler. This trainer is a by-the-books magician and isn't what I call the most entertaining of characters, but he works as a good battling dummy to Ash. Not only does he have a jerk personality that encourages the audience to boo for his downfall, but how the downfall goes makes it even better. See, the type of stage that is set for this battle is a water level, and to everybody's shock, this would be Krabby's battling debut. What made this choice so surprising is that Ash's team mainly consisted of Pikachu, the 3 starters, and Pidgeotto. When he did catch a new Pokemon, they'd usually be sent back to Professor Oak's lab to be background characters instead of team members. Krabby was the first victim of this, and for it to get into the mix made the upcoming battling not only unique compared to all before this, but also very high stakes because Krabby has no battling experience, making this a very fun yet bad idea on paper. And so the battle starts with Krabby being Ash's first pick, and as you would expect, things go south fast. But after overcoming trials and tribulations, Krabby snags a win. Don't think too much about the power scaling though, but even better, it evolved into a Kingler, which proceeds to KO the rest of Manny's team, making it a sweep. What made this battle such a good debut for the league is that it was the perfect opportunity to use Ash's never used Pokemon while also making the overwhelming sweep a perfect conclusion to Ash's first snobby opponent. So far, this tournament is off to a good start. As for the second and third rounds, they're both combined into one episode, one in the beginning and the other at the end. The reason for this is because of Team Rocket shenanigans, and while that may sound abysmal, it actually saved the episode. I'll get to why after I talk about the battles, but the first one is Ash against, I don't know. The trainer isn't named, and the only thing to work with is that they have a Nidorino, and this battle was practically off-screen until both trainers were down to their last Pokemon. And what I liked about this face-off is that Ash used his cleverness by taking advantage of the rock stage and Squirtle's unique characteristics. It isn't the most epic thing in the world, but it shows Ash can truly hold his own, and even Gary recognizes this feat. Too bad in the dub, he's reluctant to do this and just talks trash. And then there's the third battle, and oddly enough, this felt like the actual sequel to the first one. We have Ash versus Pete Pebbleman, and they both lost one Pokemon each, which again felt like the actual second round. With Kingler having a much harder time battling Cloyster and its later demise against Arcanine, it showed he can't pull the same stunt because the competition gets tougher and tougher. The battle ends with Pikachu defeating Arcanine, and this finish may have have been the weakest portion of the league so far. My main issue here is that Ash got coached way too often in that final stretch. Like, the reason him winning that battle was because of Brock and Misty being in his ear. And getting back to Team Rocket, I felt they sort of saved the episode for how uninvesting the battles actually were. A lot of people want to go, give me battles, but no doubt both battles would have been a lot more boring had we just sat through the whole thing. Like, were you really that hyped for Pete Pebbleman? Personally, I thank them for trimming some of the meat because sometimes more battles isn't better. And lastly, I feel it'd be for the better the second and third battles were switched. Not only for the Kingler balancing, but Ash's competency and Gary's recognition that was shown in the beginning would have hit a lot harder. Finally, we have the finale of the first half, and speaking of Gary, it actually starts with his elimination. I personally like this direction because Gary doesn't have that strong of a presence to warrant a worthwhile battle with Ash. And with Gary losing to a stranger, it struck a big blow for both rivals, showing Gary that maybe he wasn't so elite as he thought, and even Ash a bit of hopelessness. But regardless, he has to keep pushing, and his next battle was against Janette Fisher. This plays an important role in how well they could continue this long string of episodes, and with the first 2 episodes' worth of battles, things were looking 50-50 in terms of quality. And I'm elated to say that this was the best battle in the league conference so far. It didn't seem like much going on at first, but Bulbasaur's 2-0 KO streak felt easy. Too easy. They could have went with a regular big and strong Pokemon to turn things around, but it wasn't a Rhydon or a Nidoqueen. Jeanette's ace in the hole turns out to be a Bellsprout. This changed everything, and I adore the comedic turn this battle went through. Jeanette's comedic arrogance also made her as a character much more fun. Bulbasaur's defeat was a taste, but Pikachu's was a true signal Bellsprout meant business. I loved how when Pikachu couldn't use electricity, his only option was to throw hands. It was amazing. And just like I loved the first round for debuting Krabby, I loved this one for doing the same for Muck. This was a great show of IQ on Ash since he chose Muck due to the likeliness of grass types being in, well, the grass stage. And Muck's sludge body negating Bellsprout was a great finish with how his body slam looked identical to its comedic hugging gag. Very glad the league started to pick up pace with this, but now the first half of the league comes to a close.
Do it now! Get off your couch and do it! Do it now!
At this point, the second half begins, and this is what I personally prefer to dub as the Richie arc. With Gary gone and Ash's progression into the next round, this tournament was actually left in a pickle. Janette was a fun character, sure, and so was her battle, but how many more entertaining one-off characters can he actually spawn? And how many more matches until Ash's flame eventually goes out? It's clear that the tourney would have ran out of steam had they done the same shtick as the last 3 episodes, so this is where we're introduced to Ash's next opponent, Richie. Unlike the others, we aren't introduced to him as an opponent, but rather a very doppelganger-esque person that Ash bonds with. This is due to Team Rocket, who I like to thank again for indirectly causing the episode to be better. After the 2 lookalikes work together, we eventually learn that these 2 have a battle, and this is where the stakes may very well finally be present. Because Richie seems to be the perfect version of Ash, this will be a great chance for him to be eliminated rather than against some Joe Schmo. But before the battle, there happens to be more Team Rocket shenanigans, and this was the moment where I finally snapped with them, because unlike the previous times, this interruption actually causes inconvenience to Ash's performance in a conference. Not only was he late to the point Richie had to beg for more time to prevent Ash's disqualification, but Team Rocket's unusual persistence actually caused Ash to use up his Pokemon strength. But after finally chasing them off and making it into the stadium, the battle can finally start, but things are as bad as you think it'd be. Right off the bat, Squirtle gets taken out, and while it wasn't exhausted like Pikachu or Pidgeotto, it still felt too easy. It's also extremely weird how this tournament takes unable to battle quite literally, because this battle's the only time in the tournament where you can get taken out without getting KO'd. Things go even more south, because despite Pikachu pulling out a KO against Butterfree, he is noticeably the most tired out of the team, to the point it was a dumb move to even run out there by himself. The same move bites him in the butt with Richie's Charmander taking taking zero effort to combo him into a defeat, and from here, it's where the battle hits its lowest point, because Ash decides to bring Charizard into the mix, which has to be the worst possible decision to make. While he scares off Charmander, he literally gives up against Sparky, which cost Ash the entire match. I can see how this could be a great and fantastic moment even. Ash resorting to using the one Pokemon he can't control against the better version of himself is good tension. And the fact that using that uncontrollable Pokemon caused him his downfall was the perfect lesson to show his weakness. However, it's cancelled out by 3 big reasons I could muster up. 1. Ash uses Charizard because Bulbasaur had a type disadvantage against Zippo, but it's in Ash fashion to believe in his Pokemon regardless of disadvantage. He literally does it with the same Pokemon in the prior match. 2. Ash should have had at least 1 more viable Pokemon at the minimum. This is a problem with the first season where Ash walks around with 5 Pokemon instead of 6, and it's obviously yet sadly present in this battle here too. It's dumb because there's 3 options to fill that last slot and potentially save Ash here. And with the third and final point, Charizard shouldn't even be on the team in the first place. I get having to get around while traveling, but an uncontrollable Pokemon in your main roster while a tournament's going on feels like a wasted slot. I understand the tragic and unfair approach this tried to take, but this was unfortunately the worst part of the league so far. But after this, we hit the finale of the Richie arc and the Indigo League conference altogether. Ash hits a slump, and I like how this was both a comfort and critique moment. Misty tries her best to tell Ash that his progress was still great, and while Ash comes with excuses, Professor Oak steps in. He says that using a Pokemon that can't be controlled was Ash's undoing, which I wholeheartedly agree with. Even though this could have been avoided if he used that 6th slot, you know. But the gang decides to check in on Richie's match after the chaos, and it cuts to him losing in the final moments. I love what comes after this because Richie's perspective on losing was what I think made Ash truly reflect on things. And while Team Rocket strikes again in the middle of this, I surprisingly thank them because Ash and Richie fighting side by side showed that their bond is still connected, despite their match. They both partake in the victory ceremony and promise to settle things next time, and with that, the Indigo League conference is over. And the way I describe things is that it's an excellent league for its time, but it's also just okay in a grand scheme of the anime. To potentially reiterate some of my prior statements, I love that Ash was stuck fighting one-off characters and avoided a match with Gary. Not only was Ash better off because he bounces off of strangers better, but it really showed how big the world was, and it promotes his progression afterwards. In comparison to other leagues though, this just falls a bit short for being the first. It's no surprise that the rough draft could be surpassed by updated products. If I had to choose my favorite thing about the league, I'd say it was the reserves. Kingler and Muk were sidelined practically the whole season since their capture, but not only did they get a time to shine, but they were the stars that won Ash their debut battles. I'm even more grateful that the main team managed to stay balanced and did their own thing as well. Rest in peace for Taurus though, it deserved better. My worst thing about the league though may have to be Team Rocket. Don't get me wrong, I liked their presence for majority of the league. Their troublemaking resulted in good moments in the beginning and even was the reason Ash and Richie would have such good moments together. I also can't help but thanking them for stopping the 3rd episode from being as dry as it could have gotten. But they did way too much right before the match with Richie. While I think Ash using Charizard causes issues in more ways than one, indirectly nerving Ash before the big battle was the lowest low they could have stooped to. It was only because of the great last episode that kept me from walking away from this arc with a frown on my face. And that's what I want to end this review on. This conference definitely had some bumps, but personally I think it was solid enough to where the series kept grounded and recovered from them fairly easily. Definitely a league I can look at and smile about because of the future, but next up is Johto, and with almost 200 episodes of build up, I'll check how well the show was able to pivot from the first tournament. I'm skipping the Orange Islands because it's mainly tournaments I'm revisiting. That arc is mainly another gym badge type challenge like the Battle Frontier, so that'll be for another day, but that's pretty much all I got for now. Yep.